And now,
ladies and gentlemen,
please fasten your seatbelts.
Welcome to PreneurCast.
You know, business cards being swapped, beers being drunk.
Can I say a nasty word? Can I say procrastination?
With Pete Williams and Tom Kocher.
how well did that go down?
Talk about that entire thing in a very another rant and soapbox episode if we want to.
Visit us online at PreneurMarketing.com.
Hello on this fine evening. How are you, sir?
Yeah, I am 25 yards from the beach, sat in the bar.
Mate, do you have a Corona in hand?
No, it's coffee at the moment. I was going to have the beer after the call.
Fair enough.
So what's been happening this week?
Oh, just training, which has been good. Plenty of training. Had lunch with the Melbourne Marketing Elite on would have been Wednesday this week. I think it would have been Wednesday this week. Had lunch with a whole bunch of people, which is great. It was Ed Dale, Rob Somerville, Danny Patalik, Mike Rhodes, Steve Ovens, Dave Jennings, myself, and a couple of Ed's mentoree students as well. So it was a great little luncheon in the city. So it was a good sort of catch up and good feed and good conversation and good people. It was
Well, that's quite a crowd.
Yeah, it was kind of funny. Like literally half the people there were from my office now, given that Mike and Davey J and their team have moved in. So it was kind of funny. You know, we all sort of like shared a cab on the way back almost. Well, I drove and I just gave them all a lift. So that was kind of funny. But no, it was great. Good to catch up with everybody. Hadn't seen Rob and Ed in a while, and that was really good. That was. So
I'm guessing it was a social call and no podcasts, interviews, masterminds, or any of that kind of stuff was done during the session.
No. I tried to start a food fight with Danny and Ed to sort of get them back for their current rating in the iTunes stores for their Dominique podcast. But it was a quite classy restaurant. Ed likes to dine fine, if you will. So the food fight kind of ended before it started. But I was trying to fight for us, but yeah.
I'm glad you're sticking up for us over on that side. But don't worry. We're a slow burner. Ed went for the kind of quick hit by asking his list to do some ratings and stuff. But I think we're a slow burn. We're going for the quality, long haul content delivery idea.
Well, we're all about the quality here. We are absolutely all about the quality and the and that sort of stuff. But yes, we'll build up a solid, loyal base of listeners over time. And it's been going great so far. I've got some amazing feedback from emails, and obviously the iTunes feedback's been great. But the email interaction has been awesome. Getting a few emails every week, which I'm really loving. So
excellent.
It's good. I was talking to a couple of other podcasters, not Ed and Dan, but a few other podcasters who sort of say that they've got big listener bases according to FeedBurner, but not a lot of interaction. So very proud of our listener base. That's sort of obviously very interactive, which is great. So
cool. Right. So last week and the week before and the week before and I think even the week before, you mentioned that you were going to actually talk to us about context and framing.
Yes.
And I'm just now. I'm off the edge of my seat. I'm now hanging over the balcony with suspense on this one.
All right. Well, let me get into it. I've got a story to share, which we'll put the whole conversation of context into context. How's that for a pun on a pun inside a bad joke? So let me start the story. The young man awoke in darkness, in a strange room, in a strange city. The economy of motion he used as he went about preparing himself for the day ahead indicated that he was accustomed to awakening in unfamiliar rooms. The clothes he chose for the task ahead, while comfortable, blue jeans, a long-sleeve shirt, and a dark baseball cap, were very different from those he usually wore. He may have laughed to himself as he dressed, thinking that even those who knew him best would not recognise him in this costume. That's what it was. It was a costume. On this day, he wanted to fit in, to be inconspicuous, invisible even. The event that he was about to set into motion had been planned for weeks. He had never done anything like this before, and probably never would again. He may have even been slightly nervous at the prospect at what lay ahead. If he was nervous, he would have been amused at his own response. As he prepared to leave the room, he may even check the contents of the small black case he would be taking with him. The people he would come into contact with on that day would have been amazed to know what lay inside the case. The case, not so different from the briefcases many of them carried, but the contents was worth more than they would earn in a lifetime of work. In fact, it was worth several $1 million. And it was about to unleash its power on slightly more than 1,000 unsuspecting inhabitants of Washington, D.C. And most of them would never have even known it. As he left the hotel, he hailed a cab and asked the driver to drop him at a train station that was within walking distance of his final destination. He did not want to arrive in a taxi. He was going to take the train because he was seeking anonymity. Waiting is the word that best describes Washington, D.C., in the middle of January anyway. Washington is a city of stone, built to impress, not to offer comfort. The Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Monument, the reflecting pool that in other seasons are awe-inspiring, at this time of year are merely cold and lifeless. They, like the 500,000 inhabitants of the city, appear to be waiting for spring to warm the granite and marble and bring the city back to life. But that wouldn't happen until the cherry trees began to bloom during the first week of April. In the second week of January, with the holiday season over, the city appears to be in hibernation. You see, Washington is a city that doubles in size every workday morning and shrinks again every evening. Like a great ocean with a twice daily tide made up of people. Most of those actually live in the city, perform the jobs that keep it running. They are the waiters, the waitresses, cab drivers, shop clerks, the firefighters and police, the nurses and the trash collectors. They are part of the city's infrastructure. Many of the 500,000 people who invade the city during rush hour are government employees. Most of them live in the suburbs of Maryland and Virginia. Every morning and every evening, they clog the freeways and the surface streets, slowing traffic to a snail's pace. A great many of those who participate in this daily pilgrimage soon decide to leave their cars at home and take the train into the city. The L'Enfant Plaza metro station is among the busiest, if not the busiest, commuter train hubs in Washington, D.C. The station is at the centre of activity in the nation's capital. 4 of the 5 train lines converge on this station. But it's not a destination. It's a portal, a funnel, a collection and a distribution point through which thousands of city workers must pass every day. It is intentionally impersonal, and it was designed to be clean and efficient, not beautiful. So let's get back to that Friday morning in January. At a few minutes past 7:30 a.m, the young man entered one of the many commuter trains with his black case tucked under his arm. Dressed as he was, he blended in with the commuters. If any of the other riders that morning noticed the man at all, it probably would have been because he entered the Orange Line train at one stop and immediately exited at the next. They may have wondered fleetingly why he didn't just walk. At 7:51 a.m. on Friday, January 12th, it was morning rush hour and business as usual. Most of those exiting the train at L'Enfant Plaza on that particular morning were on their way to work in the various US government offices that surrounded the station. As the passengers exited the train and rode the escalator up to the arcade level, those directly behind him may have registered a moment of annoyance when he stopped in front of them, forcing them to veer from their straight line they'd been walking. The young man chose a spot near the wide glass exit doors that led directly into the shopping mall, and placing the black case carefully at the feet, opened it and removed his most prized possession. Some may have been momentarily curious or amused when this unassuming young man lifted an old violin from the case and began to play. He even threw a handful of change into the open case as seed money. Just another street musician, they may have thought to themselves. This city seemed to be full of them these days. Most of the busy commuters would not have registered his presence at all. Had they known, they may have been surprised to find that, after playing for 43 minutes, the young man had amassed the huge sum of $32 and change. Okay, so let's now view this scene again, but this time let's look at it through the always perfect context lens of hindsight, knowing a little bit more about what actually happened. Those who actually noticed this young man and the musician, he was playing an old violin, and they'd be correct, probably more so than they could ever have imagined. To be precise, the violin was 296 years old, a Stradivarius crafted in 1713. The young violinist, giving the apparently impromptu performance in the metro station, could never have afforded such an instrument on the $44.65 per hour he averaged that morning. But fortunately for him and the world, Joshua Bell, the violinist playing the metro station that morning, is accustomed to earning $1,000 a minute for his regular performances. Even so, he had to sell his own Stradivarius to afford the reported $3.5 million he paid for the instrument he was playing that day. So what could possibly entice Joshua Bell, the undisputed sweetheart of the classical set, to play his Stradivarius violin for the early morning commuters in Washington, D.C.'s metro station? First, you have to understand there was nothing impromptu about this performance. He did not wake up and say, I think I will treat the office workers to a free concert this morning. Although if you knew him, you might believe he would actually do that. But 3 days before his performance at the metro station, Bell played to a packed house at Boston's Symphony Hall, where just average seats went for $100. Tall, good-looking and single, Joshua David Bell has come a long way from his birthplace in Bloomington, Indiana. You might describe him as the rock star of classical music. Unlike many mediocre performers, his blazing talent has not robbed him of his humility or his humanity. Bell describes the word genius, at least when applied to him, and only tolerates the term prodigy when used in the past tense, even though he was plucking tunes from rubber bands stretching across a dresser drawer at 4 years of age. The Metro concert was proposed to Bell by the prestigious newspaper, the Washington Post, shortly before Christmas that year. The idea was to see how many people would respond to great music if they encountered it in an unsuspecting setting. A stunt? Bell asked. The Washington Post agreed that it could be considered a stunt. Sounds like fun, Bell responded. Now on that morning, that Friday morning, only one person out of the 1,097 passerbys recognised Joshua Bell. Let's call her SF. Although SF admittedly doesn't know a lot about classical music, she attended a free concert Bell had given at the Library of Congress just 3 weeks earlier. SF said that she had no idea what the heck was going on, but she wasn't about to miss it. She chose a spot 10 metres in front of Bell and stood there transfixed, with a big grin on her face for the next 10 minutes. Unfortunately, she showed up near the end of his performance. It was the most astonishing thing I've ever seen in Washington, SF said. Joshua Bell was standing there, playing at rush hour, and people were not stopping, not even looking at him, and some were flipping quarters at him. Quarters! I wouldn't do that to anybody, I was thinking. Oh my gosh, what kind of city do I live in that this could happen? But had she not attended the concert 3 weeks before? She too probably would have just passed by, barely registering his presence. And it's a story that was originally, not that exact story, but there was originally that exact thing happened. Washington Post newspaper did a stunt, as you know, Joshua Bell referred to it as, to sort of see what happens when the musician, the instrument, and the music is exactly the same, but the context in which the city of Washington would see it in, where that would actually change the reactions of people and what happened. And there's a great article that sort of goes in a lot more depth of actually what happened, and that was all filmed by hidden camera, and they sort of really dissect exactly what people did and how they reacted and all that sort of stuff. And we'll link to that in the show notes. But there's also some video too, which is really cool to sit and watch, actually him playing and the people moving around and stuff. And it's a story that I really, really love, because it just talks about or sets up a great conversation for context. Because this guy gets paid $1,000 an hour typically when he plays his $3.5 million violin, which is just ridiculous. So he hasn't changed. The violin hasn't changed. It's probably only got more valuable. And the music would be exactly the same. Yes, the acoustics might not have been as great as the Boston Symphony, but it's interesting to see that, in the context of knowing who he is, people would pay $100 minimum to see him play. This is US dollars a few years ago, so it was actually worth some currency at the time. But, in today's world, or in this world here on that particular day in that January, people just completely ignored him and just walked past him like he was anybody else. Didn't give him the time of day because the context around him wasn't right. And I just find that really, really interesting. And just context in general, obviously, is something that really intrigues me.
Wow, what a story. I kind of wish I had got a beer now instead of a coffee.
So, yeah, it's just interesting because that's just the whole, the context of a performance makes the performance so much different. And that sort of, look at it in the music world, like, that so many people go to a concert, but they're not really going for the music anymore. They're going for everything around that. The context of what a concert is no longer about the music anymore. And there's so many other conversations we can have about context that just is very important, I think, for people to really grasp and understand and just be aware that context is so important when they're doing stuff in their life. And we can kind of talk about some examples in a moment if you'd like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to get your thoughts on how this maps back to business and the other topics that we, this came up because we were talking about making proposals, writing proposals and giving them to people or approaching people. It came up in the JV and affiliate podcast we did a few weeks ago. So I am definitely interested in how this maps. Although you're right, I mean, context is everything. One of the things I heard said a long time ago was by an internet marketer was, however good you think you are at in this industry or whatever else, you set foot outside your front door and say internet marketing to somebody, you're never going to find an average person on the street who even knows what you're talking about. Yeah. So, be aware that it's massively important. Yeah. Context and is massively important to whatever you do.
Yeah, like if we sort of go down to the root level of product creation, I guess, think about, how much you're willing to pay for a book. Most people won't pay more than $20 for a book. And, with the advent of the iTunes bookstore and the Kindle, most people aren't willing to pay more than $10 for a digital book. Which is fair enough. That's a marketplace and that's a market expectations. When you show someone a book, they obviously have a predetermined price in mind. They just have this context of what that should be worth. But then if you actually take that book and you, hopefully you're doing it right and putting more content involved, but you turn it into a three-ring binder type product, and you do an audio version of it, and you get some DVDs and some CDs and all that sort of stuff, and people are selling that for $2, $3, $4,000 or $500, whatever price point it is, and that information, if it's good, should be worth that, because if someone implements it and makes their money back, and then all the power to you to charge that price. I think it's justified if you are selling high-priced information products that you give a huge value that, when people actually implement the stuff, they make more money back. But, the context has changed. The frame in which that information is presented has changed, which means you can actually justifiably charge more for that, and people won't have that predeceived concept of how much it's worth. And, on the proposal stuff we spoke about, it's really important as a marketer. I think really what a marketer's job is to a certain extent is to establish context or change frame around something. So, if you, rather than just making your proposal for your, I think the analogy was a roof tiling or something like that. If you're a roof tiler, or you're you're teaching music one-on-one, or you're a triathlon coach, or whatever it might be, you really want to change the context and the frame in which people look at your service and the solution you offer, from just being about the parts. The telco example I gave is that most people in our space historically, and still do today, make it all about the parts and the pieces of plastic and the wiring and all that sort of stuff. And that makes people shop on price, and it's really important to sort of change that context a little bit and say, look, it's more than just pieces of plastic. The context is different. It's about the solution. It's about the support, and you do that by using language in the conversations and the sales pitches and the meetings, but also in the proposals you do. You create a proposal that changes the context and the frame in which people are making a decision, and I think that's really important.
I'm really glad that you kind of moved from context into framing, because you and I have talked about context and framing in the past, independent of the podcast, and it was something that I'd never labelled it framing, but it was something that I was aware of. The book example is excellent. It's really a fantastic example, as you say, that people go online now and they can go to the Kindle Store, and on average they expect to pay $9.99, $10, whatever you want to, somewhere around there. They expect to pay $10 because that information in the Kindle Store has been commoditized, and so they're not really in the same way. Even if you think about it, that Joshua Bell was kind of commoditized by being seen as just another busker in that context, in the context of the subway station, somebody playing on the side of the subway station is seen automatically as a busker. Unless they really stand out or they're recognised for something else, then that's what's going to happen. Yep. And to really just extend that, if somebody put a sign over his head with a photo of his concert poster or whatever, this is Joshua Bell, ... that would have been enough to change that context.
It's a little bit of marketing.
For people to... A little bit of marketing. And so, moving on from there to the book, just slapping a book up into the Kindle Store, well, you're in the context of the Kindle Store. People have an expectation in a context. So, and as you were saying, you need to break them out of that by framing. And framing is the real interest to me. How we get people to recognise the value in our products or services, which is how the conversation between you and I started. It was how you get people to realise that you're not just another X. You're not just another roof tiler. You're not just another music teacher. It's not just another ebook, but it's something that has value. That's where framing comes in, yeah?
Absolutely. And I think it's just about, that's what marketing is, really. It's about sort of telling a story, is what Seth Godin calls it, or, if you studied NLP as a language, a communication tool set, they talk about framing quite a bit, about changing the frame of something to help people understand what you're trying to get to. And look, to try and sum up how to frame something correctly is more than a podcast. It's a series of workshops. It's a lifetime of work. It's university degrees. It's doctorates. Like that is just marketing. It's working out how can you change the way people perceive your product and your solution and your service in a way that helps you increase the conversion rate, increase the sale point value or the price point, and increase the evangelism that you can get in your product. Think of Apple as a way, they've created a cult because they sort of frame their products as more than just pieces of plastic and some wiring. There's a whole story and experience around that because they've framed it differently. They've framed that whole Mac versus PC thing. They've really deliberately created that context that you're either a Mac person or you're a PC person. So that when you become a Mac person, it's me against the world. It's me against everyone else. And my side's good and your side's bad. So it creates that evangelism type atmosphere that means you're going to go out and talk to people. And they created that framework by that ad series. Over time they build up that. Guy Kawasaki spoke about it years ago at a presentation or recording I heard when I was about 18, I think it was, from the $1 Million Round Table. An awesome presentation, and it's basically was a precursor to Art of the Start and a couple of the earlier books. And he talks about that he was really focused on creating evangelism for the Mac. But it's hard to sort of decipher exactly how to frame something. I know you and I had a conversation about framing and stuff when you were having some conversations with some clients.
Yeah, but to me, I agree with you completely that the study of how you do this, becoming an expert at doing this, it's a skill all in and of itself. There are people that's all they do. Copywriters and high-level marketing consultants and business consultants, that's what they do. They've studied their entire lives to do it. But, have we got some tips, some little ideas that people can do? It's for me, the one that stood out, you actually mentioned it earlier on, just identifying the benefits, kind of the fitting your product or your service into the vision of the client's future. It seems to me to be in a way of framing this. As your telco example, listing the fact that you'll get 2 XY47 handsets and 3, I don't know, doohickey whatnots and so on and so on, isn't going to excite anybody. Let's use a Guy Kawasaki word. It's not going to enchant anybody, and it's certainly not going to speak to them and tell them why they should choose your service above anyone else's. But by listing the benefits of having these things, or even listing the extra features of that particular handset that make it better than somebody else's handset, those things surely are helping to frame that that service.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's all about not trying to do the best job you can at not making your product a commodity. And this is the interesting thing, which is a whole nother conversation about the sort of the growth of Groupon and all these daily deal sites. Is people are basically making their product commodities because they're just going back to it's all about price. And I'd love to see the retention rates and the return rates from some of these businesses who are going to these places like Groupon to get a new wave of customers into their actual restaurant or massage centre or waxing place or whatever it might be. What is the retention rate of those type of clients to come back to you? If you're doing that Groupon thing as a loss leader, you're basically making your product a commodity. It's all about price. And I reckon people who go to those Groupon places go there to buy cheap stuff, not because they want a good experience. They're never going to go back to you because they're going to buy the next restaurant deal that comes up. And it's not really a direct correlation to what we're talking about, but that is you're deliberately putting yourself into a different commodity, into a different context that you shouldn't really be in. You want to try and get yourself out of those contexts and take it away from price. So you want to make it so you're getting more than just these bits of plastic. You're getting more than just a roof that won't leak. You're getting more than just a massage, whatever it might be. Could be really taken. That last one could be taken really bad, couldn't it? Getting more than just a massage. Yes. So, but there's also just in terms of context. If we sort of bring it back a little bit, I think context is important just in communication as well. Like if you're using Elance or Odesk and trying to get one-off jobs done, I think it's really important to actually communicate to those people the context of what you're asking them to do. If you're asking them to write some articles, for example, you want to tell them, hey, these articles are going to be going on my blog to be read by people. Here is the blog that they're going on. Or I want you to do a script for my website that will do this. And the reason for this is this. This is the context of the whole project. The whole idea of, maybe you want to get them to create a pop-up that pops up on your blog when someone lands on your site. So obviously there's WordPress plugins and stuff like that. People don't have to email me. I know of all that sort of stuff. I'm just giving you an example. You might want someone to code that. But, you say, I want someone to code a piece of script that will work on my website that when someone lands on the page, after 5 seconds, a light box will pop up with an opt-in box for my Aweber email opt-in. Yeah, great. But, the context should be, I want that because I'm getting a lot of traffic to this site over the next couple of weeks, and I want to make sure I capture those people as soon as they land on the site. So I get their email addresses to my opt-in list so I can market to them later. It might be pretty obvious to you, but it just puts the whole thing in context, and that developer might be able to give you some better advice. They might be able to actually go, oh, hang on, I've done something very similar, or here's a suggestion, because they know the context in which they're coding, the context in which they're doing something. And I think that's really important. If one person has a job in a process, if you're building up your outsourcing team, and there's going to be the whole process is going to be, you want one person to do keyword research using Market Samurai. You want the next person to write the article. You want the next person to use Article Samurai, new software by Eugene and the boys over there at Samurai. And then the next thing is to actually then take that article and syndicate it using something like Traffic Grab, the James Trentgrove's product. You could easily tell each person just their only one job of that particular task. When you see something in this Dropbox folder, go and grab it and do this with it. And that's fine. But if you give them the context of the entire process, it's going to give them a better understanding of what their job is. Give them more job satisfaction, job understanding. But if they have to decipher things because they're not quite clear of the actual step, they can actually look at it in the context of the whole project and understand better what they're meant to be doing, so they can stop asking you questions because they can make educated decisions based on the right context. So that's where context is important as well, is in communicating to your team so they actually understand where they're going.
That's an excellent point, actually, that to get it back to context and to look at it from a different aspect. That whole team building, team communication thing, I think, is really important.
Did I just change the context of the podcast about context?
No, actually, you didn't. You may have reframed the information.
Maybe, yeah. All right, sorry.
Just to break that for a second, I just want to point out one of the benefits of recording in the bar is that one of the very beautiful members of staff here has just brought me a beer to the table while I was recording.
Awesome.
So now I have the view, I have the beer, and I have a good conversation.
I reckon what you have to do,
Awesome.
I reckon you should take a snapshot of this right now and put it in the show notes.
Do you know what? I'm going to do that.
Awesome. Maybe also, can you take a photo with the lovely member of staff?
I'll have to ask permission. They're a little bit shy, strangely enough, in this particular bar.
Fair enough.
But we'll give it a go.
So you're not in that type of bar where they're not shy.
Absolutely not. But yeah, the context information for the team. A number of people that talk about outsourcing, including yourself, talk about building a team rather than just outsourcing. And when you're building a team, you're looking for people to grow their knowledge about your business, to be able to become more a part of your business, and they can only do that if you provide them with the information. If you treat them as isolated black boxes that just do things when asked, then they're never going to be able to do that. But if you can give them the context, then one, it'll help them perform that one task better. But as you say, you're an excellent example, and I know this is true of myself. If a client comes to me and gives me the context of the video that they want producing, the sales video or the information product or the podcast or whatever it is, then I can give them the benefit of my experience. For example, somebody might come to me and say, hey, I want this audio recording editing. Okay, fine. But if they come to me and say, it's going to be a podcast, as you know, that's a massive difference.
Yep.
Because suddenly it's gone from an MP3 file, which, well, is just going to maybe be played on a website, maybe not, don't know. But as a podcast, there's a lot more to it, and I can add value by adding the show graphic into the file, adding the show notes, actually embedding those into the file itself. So if that file gets moved around and played outside of iTunes, then it's got more information. Maybe they need help with the feed or getting it on the iTunes store or whatever it is. But without that context information, I'm just going to do what I'm asked.
It was so much more coherent than my example. I like it.
No, yours was a good example too. But I'm more the service provider, so I can speak more to that. You're the person that asks for the service and sees the benefit of giving the context. And so it's good. We're coming at it from different sides.
Yep, absolutely. So it's it's even just sort of the use of language, I think, helps change. Well, let's go a different tact. Even like when you're actually having a conversation with someone, it's really important to actually think about what the context in which they're talking about something. This is just a general sort of just human communication thing, really. Whether it's an argument or whatever it might be, it's just really important to sort of see what their context is before you sort of go off the hook and make your own decisions or understanding or assumptions. Is what's their context? How are they thinking about this? How are they coming at this particular issue, conversation, problem, solution, whatever it might be? What is their context? It's their experience of the situation, their entire experience, what else is going on in their life. It's really interesting.
Yeah, from a business point of view, I mean, it's the most basic of basics, but if you are designing an information product or writing a blog post, if you don't understand your audience, the context in which they are at right now in their experience levels, then you can't address their needs.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. You have to understand your target market, because that's, the context in which they're devouring your content should dictate how you actually create your content. There we go. The context in which people consume your content should dictate the way you create your content. There's a quote. Oh,
now you see. Now you've stepped over a line there. You stepped into my world, and I don't agree with you.
Oh, okay.
You ready for this?
Bring it on.
I think I know what you're trying to say, which is that where that person is in their experience. If you need to speak to them where they are.
Yes.
But quite literally, and this is absolutely a topic for another conversation, quite literally, and this is a mistake that a lot of people make, not you, because we've talked about this, but what a lot of people do is go, do you know what? I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna make this a podcast. I'm gonna make this a video recording, I'm gonna do whatever. And you're gonna throw it out. And my audience will like this. In reality, what is happening now is that people are consuming our information in so many different formats from so many different places Like right now, I'm in a bar by the sea. I'm not in my office. I don't have my 20x-inch iMac screen. And I'm not on a full-speed connection. I'm borrowing a Wi-Fi. I might not want to see a full-screen HD video. I might want an audio file on my iPod while I'm cycling, like you do.
True. 4.5 hours in the hills tomorrow at 6 a.m.
And yet we still think you're sane.
Sorry, I interrupted you as always.
You know, but as I say, this is a conversation for another time. That's why, you know, it's very important that it's about understanding where these people are, what they understand, what they know, and making sure that everybody knows what the conversation is about. That's context. That's one kind of context. But actually trying to push somebody into a context or only providing something in one context could cause you problems.
True. Very true. That's definitely. We should do another episode in the future about the consumption and how people consume stuff and how to actually create content that actually is, consumption friendly. That's probably a whole other episode. But I'd love to sort of, we probably should wrap this up soon. I'd love to leave people with a bit of an actionable thing that I find really helpful when I actually communicate with people and trying to just change their context a little bit. So. If you ever have a disgruntled client or a customer or a disgruntled having one of those tough conversations, something that I've seen that's worked well for me over time is using a simple statement. And it's such a simple statement. It's not really NLP. It could be NLP. I don't really know. I've never done any official NLP stuff. I've read a couple of books, but haven't really done a master practitioner, which is what they call it when you get trained. And that is just using the simple phrase, as I'm sure you'd appreciate. Like so many people come into an argument and you're going at it like two bulls head to head, and they've got their context and they're looking at you directly and you're looking at them with your context, and to try and get the other person to see it through your context is often hard. People try and you're not understanding me. You don't get where I'm coming from. You don't know what I mean. A simple thing I always do is I'll make a statement and then just say, as I'm sure you'd appreciate if you're in a similar position. Or, as I'm sure you'd appreciate, from my perspective, this is this. And that one little sentence, I've found time and time again, makes people go, okay, just subconsciously, just quickly, they look at it from your context, from your point of view, from your side. And it helps starting to break down the barriers and actually open an effective dialogue. So I thought I'd just share that because that's something that I found very helpful, as I'm sure you'd appreciate.
That's an excellent tip. I'm not a great fan of that kind of thing, of the carefully chosen phrases, mainly because I come from a corporate background, and we used to have a great deal of fun with the suits who used to have their little phrases. So I'm a little bit allergic to them, but I do like that one. Because I don't think it's false. I think it's a genuine thing to say. You're actually genuinely asking somebody to take your perspective, to view things from your point of view, to just stop being just totally in their world for a second and look at it from your side. And it's a very good way of saying it. And it also doesn't sound like corporate wankiness, which is always a bonus. As I'm sure you'll appreciate.
Aha. Touche. See you next week.
See you, buddy.
You've been enjoying another fine episode of PreneurCast with Pete Williams and Dom Gocher. Make sure to hang out with the boys online at www.preneurmarketing.com or drop them a line via PreneurCast@preneurgroup.com.